Derek, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for being here. You have spoken previously at the capstone programs, if I recall correctly, for the program. Tell us.
I've been here a couple times actually, and spoke not in this setting, but more in the classroom setting, and I've enjoyed it, and very honored to be here, and appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we appreciate your support. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So, I mean, first off, again, thank you for having me. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I think this program's pretty cool to bring people and professionals together to learn, kind of build some relationship, build some bridges that'll last you a lot longer than you might realize right now as you sit here. But a little bit about me. I mean, I'll start a little bit on the personal side because I think it's relevant to who you become as a leader and how you think about leadership. But I'm a kid from divorced parents. They got divorced when I was a year old. Grew up in inner city Houston. Anybody from Houston out there? I don't know, but so an area of Houston called the Third Ward. It's not a place you want to grow up, by the way, if you can choose not to. But that's kind of where my beginnings started. Single mom home. Stepdad came into my life later in life. Marine, with all that entails, both good and bad. But really shaped my life a little bit and got some discipline in my life for a young guy who probably needed it. Michelle's on our board, by the way. She'd probably say I still need some discipline. But that's not going to happen tonight, just to be clear. So we're going to keep it real tonight. But from those humble beginnings, I was just a kid that was blessed with a lot of opportunities. And so anytime I have a chance to give back or try to help, impart any kind of help or wisdom, I will. Don't know that I'll have any tonight, but I'll try. Because from those very humble beginnings, I was lucky enough, fortunate enough, to both have a mom who cared enough to get me out of the school district and get me in a magnet program and bus me all over the city and make me declare a love for Spanish, even though I didn't really know I had one. But that got me on a bus to a better school, which got me into an opportunity, which led to me having a football career, which led to me getting recruited and therefore the opportunity to go to Princeton. And all that backdrop matters because I really believe that the leader you become is the leader that you were meant to be if you just trust the process. And so for me, how I grew up, seeing friends of mine who not just didn't make it out of high school, but didn't live to make it out of high school. I lost 4 of my closest friends before we were out of high school. I had 400 stitches from 6 different stabbing events before I was out of high school. I had 2 different blood transfusions before I was out of high school. And so all of a sudden, that same kid wakes up at Princeton, like the literal ivory tower. And it really just woke me up to a whole world of life that I never knew existed prior to that. So these opportunities, don't take them for granted. I guess that's my point in all of that. But that's a little bit about me and who I am.
And what did you major in?
I majored in economics and finance. They don't have a finance major. If you look it up, don't Google me and check my references. But you can take finance classes there. You're not allowed to have a double major there. It's a very archaic system at Princeton. You take 4 classes a semester, not 5, not 3. There's no optionality. That's just their program, and you stick with it. But I was an econ major.
Yeah, okay. And what another great example that you can start your career anywhere you want it to be, and you can still be very successful in the transportation industry. So you're a great example of that. So thank you for that. Okay, so I know that you have the utmost respect for C.L. Werner and his family. And you've been with Werner for over 20 years.
Yes.
And I would just love to know how you felt C.L. went from one truck to the mega organization that it is today. What was his secret sauce?
Yeah, I mean, I was blessed. I'll focus on CL, but I was blessed, to be frank, by starting at Schneider also. I mean, so I had a double icon kind of existence, right? Don Schneider and all that I was able to learn from him, and then going over to C.L. Werner, and ironically, very different men, very different approaches, but equally passionate about excellence. And one guy is an MBA from Wharton. The other guy, C.L. Werner, dropped out of school in 9th grade. And this is probably the bad venue to say this, but if you ask CL, if he was sitting here, what's the secret to your success? He always says the same first line, which is education never got in the way of me making good decisions. So that's not a great thing to say at a university. I realize that, but that's what he would say. But his second thing was he would always talk about surrounding himself with people that filled the gaps. And so he and I were this great yin and yang, because on one hand you have this Princeton educated economics and finance major guy, and on the other hand you have a 9th grade dropout, like didn't finish 9th grade, quit because he was like, yeah, this school's not for me, and went out and worked on the farm and then bought a truck and built an empire from that truck. And yet he was smart enough, I was smart enough to both listen more than we talked. And over those 25 years, we would always have these amazing debates. And my advice to anybody in their career is always listen. You know, like God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Like use them in that proportion. Anytime they're out of proportion, like bad things can happen. And so him and I sitting in a room talking, you know, I might overcomplicate a subject and maybe that needed to be done and he would appreciate it. But yet sometimes he would say, well, I don't know, Derek, but just seems to me we ought to do this. And it was prophetic because that's who he was, right? And so, but we needed each other, make no mistake. Like I couldn't be who I was without both my experience with Don as well as my experience with CL Werner because they're incredible people. But CL is somebody that's a father figure and one of my best friends to this day.
Yeah, that's great. Good advice there. And now that you've been CEO for quite a few years, I think it's great that you have brought your own style and your own leadership. So how would you describe your leadership style and what changes do you feel you've brought to Werner?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a great question. I think it's a tough, really tough thing that I wouldn't wish upon the weak of heart to assume the role leading an organization that was founded by, you know, that the founder was the preceding leader. As tight as we are, as close as we are, the deep talks we had, I had strongly held beliefs that if Werner was ever going to get to where it needed to go, we had to change. I was lucky as hell that so did he believe that. So he came to me one day, typical CL fashion, and said, he called me on this is a true story. I got a text on a Saturday night from his wife, not from him, from his wife. Can you come to breakfast with CL tomorrow morning? And I'm like, sure, what do I need to bring? Nothing. That doesn't sound normal, right, to anybody? So I think, I don't know, am I fired? Like, what's happening? I walk in, he opens the door, we're walking toward the table, and before he sat down, he said, I'm selling my shares, I'm making you chairman, it's time for you to run the company. And we hadn't even sat down yet. So that was small talk in CL's world. But he looked at me and he said, Derek, it's clear to me that where I want this company to go, what I want this company to become, is not something I can do, but only you can. And he said, and I said, okay, that's great, but why sell the shares? Like, don't sell the shares. I kind of like that 37% moat built around the building owned by a family member. And he said, because I can't, it won't be official, and I won't trust myself, and I won't be able to really let go unless I do. And so the question was, what do I do differently? So we had a lot of we had all the positives of a family-run business, but we had the negative ones too, which is, you know, I have a saying that I believe in leadership, that the worst ideas come from the top. And that's a very ironic thing to believe in if you're the CEO and chairman of a company. But what I mean by that is you can be right 99 out of 100 times, but the only bad decision that can bring a company to its knees is one that starts at the very top. Because bad decisions that come from the middle or the bottom, they get snuffed out through the gauntlet of no's that exist in organizations. But a really bad decision from the top can bring a company to its knees. But we had this sort of, he was sacred. I would argue, and I don't want to offend the Schneider folks in the room, but Don was sacred too. And unfortunately, that sacredness can get you in trouble. And so I wanted to reset that. That's a hard reset to do, to teach and get and build a culture that says it's okay to challenge. Healthy friction is important. Pushing back is what your role actually is. And making sure that we don't make these bad decisions. The second one was back to the approach he would take, and this is all said with respect. I mean, he's literally like my idol, but he would be quick to decide and quick to implement and quick to judge and quick to move. And I thought it was time in this complicated world we're operating in that you got to slow down a little bit, and you got to take in all the input. You got to take in data from multiple sides, and you got to frankly take in data, period, because founders aren't big on that. It's all gut feel, and damn, their guts are good. But when there's a lot of data out there, it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, right? And so making that evolution has been a challenge, and building a culture that doesn't just snap because I say something and instead is comfortable saying why, like explain further or push back, took years. I'll tell a quick anecdotal story. I'm sorry for my long answer, Michelle, but I think it's relevant. So early in that time when CL was gone and I was now chairman and CEO, I walked into a company update meeting, and I'm big on that. So we do tons of town halls. I go to any terminal I'm at. I have open mic. We never did that before. Questions had to be submitted. They had to be reviewed. They had to be approved. I said, no, put a mic in the middle of the room and let it fly. And do that tonight, by the way. Let it fly. Because that's how truth gets out, right? That's how, if you believe in what you're doing, you shouldn't have anything to hide from. And so we made these little changes. But anyway, I walked into a company update meeting one day, and as I walked by, I was late. I was running to get there, and I saw some drinks on the side, and they got in, and they could tell I was flustered, and they said, would you like a drink? And I thought I had seen a Diet Dr. Pepper. I don't drink Diet Dr. Pepper, but I thought I saw one. And I said, yeah, just grab me a Diet Dr. Pepper real quick, and I'll take a swig before I go on stage. Well, there wasn't one. Well, in a founder-ran business, you go get one. You find one. So some poor person ran literally a half mile over to where the cafeteria is, ran back, covered in sweat, handed me a Diet Dr. Pepper because they thought it was an order, not me actually trying to be polite. That's not the funny part. The funny part was for the next 2 years, everywhere I went in the country, whoever greeted me had a Diet Dr. Pepper in every car, in every venue, and we finally had to put out like a company-wide message, like, I don't even drink Diet. And so I'm just framing like an anecdotal story because that's really what you're up against, is if you want to build a culture that's in my view, the right kind, which is bottom up, you got to stamp that kind of behavior out and let people know that it's okay to say, we don't have that. We got water, boss. Like, oh, you want a water? Fine, I'll take it, so.
No, that's a great lesson to learn and something that you all as leaders should take note of for sure. So Werner has lots of great stats these days. I mean, the company continues to grow, and you've been able to increase diversity among the driver ranks. And tell us the current stats.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud. Sometimes it takes, if I have a flaw, it's that I think sometimes sit back and smell the roses, and I think that's true of a lot of people that are driven. You got to kind of look back. And so recently I was asked to put a presentation on at a different university, and they wanted to know about the growth trajectory. And I'll start with this one because it just kind of shocked me. In 2021, we were a $2 billion company. And as we sit here today, we're about $3.6 billion. I didn't even realize that. Like, it just kind of happened because we're doing our job, we're expanding the portfolio, we're trying to grow and make a difference out there. And so that's one that I'm proud of because I do believe that a company's not growing, it's dying, period. Like, you owe it to your associates, you owe it to your customers, you owe it to your investors. But if you're not growing with them, then you're leaving somebody out to dry, whether that's career development, whether that's your customers who need you to grow with them, whether they need more portfolio products. I think it's something that has to be like in the blood of the organization. But some other stats that I'm super proud of is, our female driver percentage in our fleet is now roughly, it went over 15% here recently, on its way to 16%. And depending on what national averages you look at, they say 5%, but ATRI just recently did a study where they studied roadside inspections over the course of an extended period of time, and in Class 8, the number they came up with was 2.8% in over-the-road trucking. We're at 16. I'm proud of that. I'm also proud, so for all the ladies in the room and all the men in the room, get ready to be excited and pissed off in a second. Our female drivers have better service records. They have better safety records. They have better performance records overall. Our male drivers have better production. So they produce more miles, they stay more active. And so the joke inside is always how do you learn from one another, right? How do you get the male drivers to slow down a little bit and take a little more care with what they're doing? And maybe how do you get the female drivers to keep all that same care, but maybe do a little more, put a little more miles on the truck? But I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the diversity in our fleet. Our fleet is over 50% diverse. That's something we're excited about. That stuff means a lot to me. Again, going back to how I grew up. I mean, I spent most of my life as a child. 4 of my first 6 years of school, I was not one of 5. I was the only white kid in my school. And so I have I'm not saying I can ever really fully appreciate what it's like to be a minority, but I can tell you in one kid out of 400, you kind of get a point. You kind of get a general idea of what it's like. And so I love the idea that we're embracing that. At the same time, I'm a big believer that it's a interesting time in our country's history, right? How do you navigate doing the right thing and create an inclusive culture, which my stance at Werner is, if you don't feel included, if we don't have an inclusive culture, you need to raise your hand and we need to fix it, and that's on us, period. But at the same time, not build some new level of exclusivity in the process, because everybody's got to be along for the ride. So my point being, our mantra is we want to build an environment that is absolutely inclusive and everybody feels welcome and brings their whole self, but along with that brings full ownership and accountability, regardless of race, color, creed, sex, or orientation. And that's a delicate balancing act. But there's a lot of that going on. Like at our board level, it's an interesting thing for me because we get all these, we just got another award this last week, and we have 4 female board members out of 8. And I would argue that it's a bit problematic that they want to shower you with these awards because you're a 50% female board. Because I can assure you not one of them's on there because they're a female. And so why are we putting outsized attention on that? I just think it's something that we've got to really challenge over time. Every one of them was added to the board because they brought a skill set that we desperately needed, and they've proven to have made a difference, and we're damn proud to have them, especially this one right here. I'm proud of that. So yes, we'll accept the award. We're not stupid. Yeah, we'll put out a PR or press release. Why wouldn't you? But I think I hope we get to a day where that's not the real focus, but it's really the quality of the individual.
Yeah, we certainly all hope for that. And I just want to say being on the board has been a tremendous opportunity, and I'm so thankful that you chose me. So that was great. So on that note, I'm just curious, you've made a lot of acquisitions lately, and that wasn't part of CL's original vision, but that was something that you felt needed to be done. Yes. Tell us about the acquisitions that you've made.
Yeah, we had never made an acquisition in 63 years, 64 years, I think it was. I don't believe that's the core of what we're going to do or who we're going to be. I think it's an and proposition, not an or. I firmly believe if you can't grow your company organically, then you need to absolutely stop the presses and figure out why, because organic reinvestment back in your core business has got to be strategy one. And the second it becomes secondary, I think you've got a problem. I've never met a long-term roll-up that in the end of the story, maybe at chapter 5 it looks great, in chapter 7 it looks great, but tell me the one that at the end, if all it was a big roll-up of multiple companies that ever ended up great. But I think additive acquisitions that serve a specific purpose inside the portfolio that make you better on an accelerated path in an area that organically would have taken too long make all the sense in the world. And so we look at, so if you look at our 4, I'll kind of go through them quickly. ECM up in the East Coast, customers all over this country want to find a better way to serve the 5 boroughs, Philly, Boston, all that East Coast corridor. And last time I checked, we don't have a lot of drivers that are just begging to go to the Bronx. And the customer demand's not going to go away. People are still going to live there. They're going to want that service. And so rather than fighting gravity, go out and find somebody who's best in class at that. Give them a home, give them a place to be a part of something bigger, give them maybe the capital they would otherwise starve to receive, and build both a solution for the customer, for our associates, for our drivers, and try to do it and pull it off with some effectiveness. And so that was the first one. We were very happy. Same thing on Final Mile. We were building out a Final Mile business. It was going well. It was profitable. It was actually growing at a fairly rapid clip. We were excited about it, but we needed to accelerate it because the big players in the market, the big customers in the market expected more now, not in a year or two when I could finally build it. And so we went out and found Northeast Home Delivery Services and added them to the portfolio, and it fit our dedicated model because it's a dedicated home delivery model. It's not a you call, we haul kind of home delivery model, and that's been fabulous. And we love those folks, and they're doing great work, and it's more than doubled, and that's great. And so we were very excited. Sometimes you get curveballs that you weren't expecting, and so the third one was Baylor Trucking, and that was just an inbound call from Carrie Baylor, who said, I need a home. I want to find a home for this business. I want it to be Werner. I want it to be you, Derek. I want to be a part of it. And that was interesting because I can't make as big a strategic fit on that one other than sometimes it just feels right. And I think the world of Carrie. I think she ran a heck of a business. I spent 3 months trying to talk her out of selling it to us, which is a really weird strategy, because I really think the industry needs that female leader out there that's running her own business, that's independently doing it. But she said, that's all fine and good, but I need to be part of something bigger, and I'd like to be mentored and led and developed by somebody like you and something like Werner. And so in the end, we made a deal. And so Baylor has been a great addition to our organization. And the last one, and arguably most exciting, was Reed TMS, which is the logistics company down in Tampa, where we were able to take and in one level, just steps, add to our 700 million or so of brokerage a $400 million broker that did everything we didn't do. So it wasn't just revenue. Like, I don't believe it makes any sense to just go buy companies that do what you do already just to add revenue. They've got to be bringing something to the party that makes your business better, more attractive to customers, more attractive to associates. And they were strong in food and beverage, in refrigerated brokerage, in produce, in agriculture, things we did none of, but yet had customers clamoring for. And so we added them into the fold as well. And I'm sure there'll be more in the future, but that will not be our go-to move for growth. I'll say it again, if your core business, your organic business isn't performing well and reinvestable, then adding stuff, rearranging the furniture or the deck chairs on the Titanic isn't going to save the day, right? So we had to shore that business up. The other question I get asked a lot, Michelle, is, well, you became CEO in 16 and you still didn't do anything for 3 or 4 years, and then you did. That was very purposeful, because I believe we had a lot of things in our organization that needed to be fixed. And so I had zero interest. We had a couple of great opportunities. Some folks in this room ended up buying a couple of them, by the way, that I thought were great companies. But until we got our house in order the way I thought it should be in order, performing at the level that it should be performing at, the last thing I wanted to do was add an acquisition into the mix. So we set internal goals and said, until we hit X, Y, and Z metric, that's off the table. We're not going to look at acquisitions. That also gives motivation to people who are pro-acquisition to go out and get the house in order quickly. And so that worked, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that Carol Tomei, when she was CFO at Home Depot, always said, she quoted Peter Drucker saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. Werner has such a strong culture, and that's something that I know that is a big focal point for you and really important. As you're bringing in all of these acquisitions, how are you translating the Werner culture? Because I'm sure they think they have a wonderful culture that they've also built. So how do you transition to come up with a culture that fits both companies?
I mean, look, I'm not going to say we've got it perfect, by the way. There's been some bumps and bruises. You've probably read about a few of them. But there's been difficulties along the way, for sure. I would tell you, now that we've done 4, the one thing I've learned is go quicker with more purpose and be more direct about what expectations are earlier in the process. Now, we eliminate the vast majority of acquisition targets that we've ever eliminated have always been about culture. I remember a company that we really liked a lot, and we went to dinner with the owner. This would have been back like after ECM, but before Baylor. And at dinner, the owner looked at me and said, you guys do all this driver stuff, and I see you out all the time at the terminals, and you're always posting driver messages, and I just don't get it. Like, at the end of the day, you got a truck, you got a trailer, you got a driver, and you get new ones of all 3 all the time. You could just get another driver. Like, why do you spend all that time? We excused ourselves from the dinner and said, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, so I think we're done talking. And that ended the discussion. And I think those are the tough calls you have to make as a leader, because there were still things about that company I liked. There were still things my team loved. And I said, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not going to work here. Like, we can't mix that in here. I'm not letting that inside the gates. And we just called off the negotiations at the dinner, real time, right after that statement. But our culture means a lot. So things I believe in, we talk, I'm a sports guy, sorry. I believe in, team-oriented things. And so I talk all the time about, especially in this world we're in, back to some of the social issues going on, right? At the end of it all, I want everybody to feel welcome, included, that their voice matters and they can bring their whole self. But right in front of all of that, it's still about the name on the front of the jersey, not the one on the back. So if we all go to our neutral corners and we all want to just be or identify as a subset of the larger organization, that's great to find that commonality, to find that comfort, to find that inclusivity, but you have to care about the name on the front of the jersey more than you do the one on the back at the end. And so we look for that when we're looking at acquisitions. We look for people that feel the same way. You don't get it always right. When you do, you know what it looks like. I would throw a parade for the Reed TMS people anytime, because we saw them, we felt it was right, and it's so much more right than we ever thought it was every day since the day we acquired that company. And so now we're better at it, and we know what we're looking for even more.
That's great.